Well, hello there, you lovely, lovely lot. It is Rosanna here, Rosy Glow. Hope you're well. I've actually found myself in a little corner, which is the only space I can find that doesn't have the wind blowing, needing literally to create safety within so I can make this video. Out there, the sea, well, I'm going to hopefully be able to show you, the sea's really rough. The winds are blowing, there's a whole load of shifting and changing going on. And if you saw any of my previous videos earlier this week, you'll know that I just attended a really awesome 3-day training called Sensory Babies that was really aimed at people who are working with neonates, prenates, so those born prematurely, and also what we'd call sensory sensitives, which, looking at something I just saw on Instagram, where by the age 32, something like 40% of us are testing as high in anxiety and 50% high in depression. The question of being sensory sensitives is something that is affecting us all. And again, won't bang on about my theory about post-World War trauma too much. That is another video that I'm planning. But the key thing for us is about co-creating something we want to create in our lives, whether it's a new project, a baby, a relationship, more money, whatever it is that matters to you. How can we possibly create anything in the outer world and have consistent success, even create a life, if we don't have a sense of safety within, if we have not cultivated a sense of safety within? And how do we cultivate a safety within if we have never felt safe within? And by that I mean, the government recognises the first 2001 it might be 1,001 days of a child's life are so formative, and that includes the time from conception onwards. So if the experience is one where we were basically in a womb that was highly stressed, very fearful, had a lot of stress factors that were stopping the pregnancy being one that was enjoyable, they could be physical, emotional, psychological, then we grew up in a womb of high cortisol, high adrenaline, high stress hormones as our norm, and we basically developed to be able to withstand that level of stress. But we never learned how to feel safe inside, we just learned how to be on high alert. And I don't know how many people really genuinely feel safe inside. There are big issues with how we self-soothe and we self-regulate, and this is what being sensory sensitive is all about. You will have heard me talk before about being intuitive empaths or being empaths. As children, we're incredibly sensitive to the environment that we grow up in, and we are more sensitive to what isn't said than what is said. Something that I found really, really interesting on this training was that research says that it is more damaging to a child growing up to be intermittently abused, and by that I mean inconsistently shouted at, inconsistently punished, inconsistently anything more than that, sexual, physical, etc. Inconsistently ignored. You know, these are all forms of abuse, for want of a better word. We have learned our parenting styles through the way that we were brought up, and there's been loads of research that's gone on in the last 50 years, 100 years. Really, since the Victorian times, you could say we started trying to quantify things. But the books keep changing, more research keeps coming. You know, here I am learning neuroscience of preborns and newborns with that's current research, and finding out that best practice can't even be practiced. For example, we know that babies really benefit from co-sleeping. The whole emotional, physical regulation that comes from skin to skin, and our own heart rate and temperature rate and breathing rate being regulated by our parents is preventative of cot death. However, the fear, the risk of us rolling onto our babies and some professional actually saying to you, sleep with your baby and then your baby suffocates, means that we cannot recommend sleeping with our babies. Professionals cannot recommend sleeping for parents to sleep with their babies because of the risk and the fear of litigation. This takes me into the whole thing around patriarchy and birth, which will be another video. But for now, if you want to create something in your life, it is going to be absolutely essential that you can keep coming back to yourself. Oh, doggy's coming. You can keep coming back to yourself when things are fluctuating. So when the weather's lovely out there and it's easy to sit in the sun and soak it all up, we're all good. But when the winds are changing, when the sea's tempestuous, where do you find that anchor point inside of you if it hasn't been modeled before? What tools do you actually have, and do those tools actually really help you to be able to co-create, or do they keep you where you're used to being, and every time you feel like you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone, those tools will bring you back to your comfort zone. Just see Nadina, hello Nadina darling, a point of reference based of love and not on fear. We're wiring through love. Thank you. Yes, we are in this together, and we're all remembering this together. So, how can you feel safe creating something if you don't trust yourself as a creator? Have a little think about that. How can you feel safe creating something in your life if you don't trust yourself as a creator? And how can you possibly trust yourself as a creator if the whole time that you were growing up, those early times before you started to question your parents' point of view and whether they were right or not, and whether they were tired or not, or whether they were grumpy and projecting on you, if you took all the criticism, all of the judgment, all of the good girl, good boy, bad boy, this is okay, this isn't okay, hey Ian, then how on earth are you going to trust yourself as a creator? How are you going to be able to step forward into something new without those voices that are deeply ingrained in you coming in and going, you can't do that, who do you think you are? You haven't got the skills for that, you're not good enough, you're too much, whatever the judgments are. And this is why it is so important that we are working with the conscious mind and the subconscious as well. And for sensory sensitives, who many of us are, because it is very, very rare, even if we had an amazing pregnancy experience in our mother's womb, even if she was super happy, super supported, hey Cherie, even if all the most wonderful conditions were in place, the birth is intense. We are recovering from post-Victorian times, which is when we really started to mess things up, in our quantifying and qualifying everything, from separating babies from their mothers, from poking and prodding these babies, from isolating mothers and fathers, and the whole thing around work and getting back to work and preparing your baby for the world that they're going to be in, and emotional intelligence. Before that, in the 80s, it was all about hot housing and sort of flashcards and everything else to make your children intelligent. We've kind of bombarded our children with sensory overload. Either we have been denied the sense of, it's not sensitivity, either we have been denied the sensory cues we need to develop, or we have been oversensitized. So we have, with sensory sort of overload, if we've had well-meaning parents that have kind of been in our phases the whole time and not observed our own cues and not observed when we've had enough until we completely melt down, then we can't respect our own cues. We don't even know how to create safety inside of ourselves without numbing out. And equally the other way round, if we were not stimulated enough, which happens if we were separated, if we ended up in incubators, or if we were just taught from the start, keep your baby in the cot, don't pick them up too much, only feed them every 3 hours. That's our grandparents and our parents, even if it wasn't us. Then we have created a disruption in this flow of being able to self-regulate and self-soothe. So there's a real question there in terms of what you do to self-soothe, in terms of what you do to self-regulate. Most of us find some way to numb out. But everything I learned this weekend, or this week, was about flexion, which ironically I thought flexion was going like that. But flexion is coming back to the midline and just creating this sense of integration and safety where we either hold our faces, our hearts, or our solar plexus. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about all of this, but the main thing is, if you want to create a baby, if you want to create a change in your life, then it is going to be important to make sure that your inner chemistry can be regulated by you at will, that you can self-soothe, you can self-regulate, and it's a question of what tools you have to do that. Now, your conscious mind will be like, yeah, I got this. You know, I know how to do it. I just lengthen my out-breath, I just breathe more deeply, this is all fine. And yeah, when your conscious mind's on it, you're right, that works. But if 90% of the time we are operating from our subconscious programming, then that means when your focus is not actually on self-regulating, for the most part, you're not going to be in that state. You'd have to do an awful lot of self-regulating, which is where meditation comes in, and having a regular meditation practice for those who have or don't, morning and evening practices, etc. But it is really important to be able to look at the triggers that we have in our lives that take us out of being able to self-regulate, out of our homeostasis, into a state of fight or flight. Something else I learned that was interesting about this weekend was that our nervous system, we've kind of oversimplified the autonomic nervous system in terms of fight and flight and freeze and sort of bunched it all together. But there's been a lot more research done on the vagus nerve and the fact that fight-flight are a state of high stress and anxiety, which when we are in a high state of anxiety for long periods of time, that then leads to depression because it's that high alert that we dip down into. But freeze is actually when we've got no hope. It's when there's just not being listened to. So it tends to be the effect of being massively overstimulated, but usually massively understimulated children, and when we were ignored. And if you think about the orphanages in Romania and so forth and things that happen. So the bottom line is, if you're struggling with something, with creating something, creating safety within is utterly important, but also it's really important to be honest with yourself and to check in with whether you think you really want what you want, or whether you really do want it, because we say we want things, but then when it comes to it, we'll find some kind of excuse. It's usually time or money, too many things going on, other people, life gets in the way, that prevent us from actually doing the deep inner work and focusing on ourselves. Now, if you do really want something and it seems like you just cannot create it, you just cannot achieve it, remember what I said about the safety thing. The other side of it is that ultimately you just don't feel you're worthy of it, you just don't feel you deserve it, you're just not good enough. And that is a basic premise for us self-sabotaging in the most phenomenal ways regularly. Okay, so if you feel like you want to shift that, then it's going to require lots of things. I work basically with a 5-step process, which kind of gets you to align, gets you to set intention, then gets you to undo what's in resistance to that, then gets you to realign, then gets you to maintain, and then gets you to expand. But there are many components, and it's actually finding what your key triggers are. And as I was saying to a friend yesterday, we know we're all Ascended Masters in training, but we've really grasped something when we can be in an environment that would normally trigger us, but we're not triggered. So for a woman who wants a baby, being around pregnant women or being around new babies doesn't trigger her in the same way it used to. For someone who wants a relationship, same thing. For someone who is seeking to shift their career, their life, whatever it is, your job, move house, that when you see the things you want, instead of actually being triggered in a negative way, you really see that as a sign that you're bringing it into your life, into your sphere of influence, into your physical reality. So, let me know how that sounds to you. If you are interested in knowing more about all of this stuff and what you can do with me to actually basically create that safety within, then get in touch, drop me a line. I know we've got some landing pages for inquiries coming in soon, but you can definitely subscribe to Rosie Glow Facebook page, YouTube, and the website. The new Prosperity Challenge has been updated, and it's even better. But again, what is it? It's about clearing blocks, and you cannot have perfect health, you cannot have wealth, you cannot have happiness in relationship if you cannot trust that whatever happens externally, that safety inside is something you can come back to again and again and again. And your happiness, your well-being, your sense of fulfillment doesn't come from the outside, it comes from within. Literally, the fountain of all you want is inside of you, and it's accessing that, knowing it's underneath all of the stuff that basically gets us to miscreate. So if you want to stop miscreating, start creating what you want, you know where to come. I hope you're well, and I wish you a beautiful weekend. And remember that if you do want to start somewhere, try the heart-brain resonance exercise, because that really helps to start giving you a sense of that safety. What you do with it then, that's the next bit, isn't it? Get in touch. Lots of love. Take care.